WWII Battle Maps, Market Garden, Part 1. September 1944. Just a few short months have passed since the landings in Normandy, but Europe's landscape has already changed beyond recognition. Soviet forces are pushing through Poland and Romania after a string of major victories and are eyeing further offensives into Hungary, eastern Czechoslovakia, and Bulgaria. Meanwhile, on the Western Front, France and Belgium have been mostly liberated, and scattered German troops struggle to contain British and American forces. Yet more German troops have escaped encirclement in the West than perhaps expected. Now there's a real risk that German forces could regroup and fortify along the natural barrier of the Rhine River. British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery believes he has a plan to pierce this defensive line before the Germans even realize what's happening, potentially opening the gates for the British Second Army. With the most ambitious air assault ever attempted, could the Western Allies end the war in 1944? Background. In late summer 1944, the Allied command faced a critical question: how best to exploit Germany's collapse in France? Two competing strategies emerged. Supreme Commander General Eisenhower favored a broad front advance, pushing along the entire line from the Channel coast to the Swiss border. This would maintain constant pressure on German forces and keep supply lines flexible. It also reflected his desire to balance coalition forces, ensuring American, British, and Canadian armies all had active roles, and his caution that Germany might recover if a concentrated thrust became overextended. In contrast, Field Marshal Montgomery and General Patton argued for a narrow front advance, concentrating the Allies' best forces into a small corridor aimed at rapid advancement towards key strategic targets. Montgomery proposed a single, concentrated thrust north into the Netherlands and the Ruhr Valley, Germany's industrial heart. This approach required concentrating scarce resources, especially fuel and airborne assets, at the expense of other Allied armies. Still, Montgomery believed this strategy offered the fastest, most decisive results. Operation Market Garden would embody this narrow front approach. By seizing a corridor through the Netherlands and crossing the Rhine at Arnhem, Montgomery hoped to bypass the Siegfried Line and open a direct road to the Ruhr. The operation was presented as an opportunity to dramatically shorten the war. Montgomery's planning papers emphasized breaking into Germany, seizing its faltering war economy, and creating a momentum wave that might carry the Western Allies all the way to Berlin in 1944. Allied supply situation. Supply was a pressing concern. Many units faced critical shortages of fuel and equipment. The rapid Allied advance over the summer had stretched supply lines beyond their intended capacity. Though ports like Antwerp had been captured, they were not yet fully operational. Meanwhile, French resistance fighters, anticipating a prolonged campaign, had sabotaged railways that would have been invaluable to the advancing Allies. This made Market Garden a costly gamble. Failure would not only delay progress, but exhaust limited resources, leaving the Allies waiting for supply lines to catch up. At the same time, the Soviet Union's major victory in Operation Bagration and the destruction of the Wehrmacht's Army Group Center put additional pressure on the Western Allies to act. While no one explicitly aimed to race to Berlin against the Soviets, Montgomery and the British certainly wanted to land a decisive blow to the Third Reich first. This desire stemmed partly from Britain's long-standing role as Germany's adversary. Market Garden also gave the British High Command a chance to reassert themselves after shifting from leading campaigns in Africa and Italy to becoming increasingly subordinate in a largely American-led Normandy operation. Planning. The planning phase for Market Garden lasted just over a week. The concept first emerged in early September 1944 as Operation Comet, which was feasible by September 7th. It evolved into Market Garden and was approved on the 10th, with operations scheduled for the 17th. This short planning period meant little time to refine details, coordinate logistics, or rehearse with airborne divisions, though planners remained hopeful that German resistance would be light. Planning divided into two parts. Market, the airborne component, tasked with securing a corridor through the Netherlands. The U.S. 101st Airborne Division under Major General Maxwell Taylor would land around Eindhoven, capturing bridges over the Wilhelmina Canal and Dommel River. The U.S. 82nd Airborne Division under Brigadier General James Gavin would land near Nijmegen and Grave, capturing the crucial Nijmegen Bridge and holding the Groesbeek Heights. The British 1st Airborne Division, commanded by Major General Roy Urquhart and reinforced by Major General Stanislaus Sosabowski's Polish 1st Independent Paratroop Brigade, would land west of Arnhem, tasked with seizing and holding the Lower Rhine Bridge, the most critical and hardest to supply objective. Garden, the ground offensive, led by Lieutenant General Horrocks' 30 Corps of the British Second Army. Its spearhead, the Guards Armored Division, supported by infantry and other units, would drive north along a single highway, linking successively with each airborne division. The scale of the airlift was unprecedented. Over 5,000 planes, including combat and transport aircraft, and 2,500 gliders were earmarked for the operation. Even with this vast assistance, forces were too large to deploy in a single wave, requiring staggered landings over 3 days. Any delay due to weather could derail the timetable and leave some units exposed. Disposition of forces. The occupied Netherlands was defended by a patchwork of German formations. General Kurt Student's 1st Paratroop Army consisted mostly of undertrained and ill-equipped units. He took command on September 4th after a call from Operations Chief Alfred Jodl, ordering him to establish a line of defense along the Albert Canal and hold at all costs. In the Arnhem area, the main force was the 2nd SS Panzer Corps under Wilhelm Bittrich, recently refitted after Normandy. Though under strength, these SS units still had veteran troops, artillery, and some armor. Both forces ultimately fell under Army Group B and were expected to coordinate in defense. British intelligence and Dutch resistance reports indicated a heavy German presence, including armor, around Arnhem, but planners discounted this, expecting light opposition. Airborne divisions were briefed that their main resistance would consist of Hitler Youth and older men on bicycles. German intelligence anticipated a large airborne operation, but could not identify precise targets. Geography and airborne operations. Eindhoven and Nijmegen offered open drop zones near objectives. Eindhoven, the 101st Division, would land about 2.5 kilometers from Sun, with one regiment northwest of Veghel. Nijmegen, the 82nd, would land in the Groesbeek area, with one company 800 meters west of the Maas River Bridge. Arnhem presented the greatest challenge. Landing zones were several kilometers west of the town, on heathland, leaving paratroopers with a long march to the Rhine Bridge and reducing the chance of a swift capture. Forests west of Arnhem provided some cover from anti-aircraft fire, but deployment and supply of forces remained the most difficult task. Over 1,500 transport planes, including C-47s for American paratroopers and British Sterlings and Halixes for glider towing, would carry the initial wave, supplemented by 478 gliders, British Horsa, Waco, American, and British Hamilcar for supplies. 30 Corps' advance north along the road was precarious. Long raised segments above marshes exposed tanks to anti-tank fire, forcing infantry to wade through wetlands to clear German positions. Success depended on flawless execution, making